following up from Socrates and his demon, or daemon, we have Julian Jaynes, who is Juilliard's psychologist, although not a philosopher. It's quite interesting how it bleeds into philosophy, as almost all humanities do. He's quite controversial in the psychology world. He's quite like, he had also the choice of exile or death. He didn't have death, the death part, but he was exiled from the whole psychology part because his psychology is deemed dehumanizing, and you'll see why in a second. So basically, he said that the mind is comprised essentially of, consciousness is comprised of two parts, the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere, and he called this the bicameral mind. So his reasoning behind why these sort of ancient people had a voice that would speak to them, a tulpa, a sort of outside voice that they were in no control of. He called it a god's voice. And he said this was because they hadn't actually, the one half of their brain hadn't synchronized properly with the other half of their brain yet. So they were essentially, they're speaking to themselves, they're advising themselves, like the little voice, you know, the consciousness, the sort of internal monologue a lot of us have, the internal dialogue. But instead of us being entirely control of it, they weren't. So he uses some interesting evidence for this. Like, he says that schizophrenia is an artifact of this left and right sort of bicameral mind. And he also uses sort of like cultural things of like how people from the past would just continually feed and clothe the dead because they weren't able to comprehend that they were dead. And their God voice was telling them, advising them to continue to care for this person in a way that they would if they were still alive. He also uses the example of, I think it's the Iliad, not the Odyssey, but of the gods speaking to like Achilles and Agamemnon and all those sorts of characters. Obviously, it plays into Socrates and his daemon. And there's a few other sort of interesting philosophers like Carl Jung and stuff like that who claim to have some kind of like divine voice that would intervene and speak to them. And this is sort of his explanation for these kinds of things. The problem that sort of goes here is hence why he kind of got banished from psychology, other than the fact that it's pseudoscience, is it dehumanizes people because you're essentially saying some people are NPCs. So if you're saying that some people are naturally more evolved, their brain is more complete with the left and the right hemispheres, that, you know, their brain is essentially more holistic, there's a greater hegemony of consciousness, then we run into the problem that you're essentially saying some people aren't as conscious as others. Some people are literally AI coded on autopilot doing the bumblebee dance. They're just NPCs or borderline NPCs. This dehumanizes a lot of people. It can also be used against a lot of people for something the army uses, actually. It's called I think it's called pseudo speciation, and it's where you essentially believe the enemy isn't truly conscious or isn't truly a person, so you remove that aspect of empathy. These are obviously all quite large tangents from his work that I'm sure he probably didn't anticipate, but they can be derived from it nonetheless. He uses quite a metaphorical language. It's still I find it quite easy to understand. It's always worth Googling it. I'd advise Googling these things or watching a video essay or something before you read them. Always helps. But this is quite obscure, quite niche. It helped me write one of my books, Void Around Sunlight. It's part of like the hive mind, Boltzmann brain. We're all one brain hallucinating its own reality. It's convinced itself it's comprised of billions of other brains, when it would be much more likely statistically that we're just one brain rather than billions of individual brains. So yeah, I definitely, if you're into an interesting sort of info hazard rabbit hole, Julian Jaynes is the guy.